For this walkthrough, we'll be taking a look at how you can create an interior FPS level, something like this. Pretty basic and straightforward, but one of the most common uses for ProBuilder, of course, especially in the Greyboxing stage. So here I've created a pretty basic level here, nothing too fancy. Just enough that maybe you could start throwing in your characters or even multiple players and test it out. See how the level flow is, make sure your game mechanics are working well, all the sort of things that you would want to do with a quick, easy gray box level that you're not going to have to spend a lot of time building, light mapping, etc. We might not get quite as detailed in the tutorial. I'm going to try to keep this, or rather the walkthrough, I'm going to try to keep it under about 15 minutes, but let's go ahead and jump right into that so we can get as far as possible. So I'm going to start by creating a brand new scene. And from here, we'll start building. First thing, I'm going to make sure I have ProGrids turned on and visible. I definitely want to use that to build this up, at least for the early portion. And it's sometimes hard to tell where I am exactly in the world when I'm starting, and I like everything to start right on 0, 0. So let's create some random object. Use the exact transform position tools to set it to 0, 0, 0. And now, if I just middle click on part of that, I have the Unity camera oriented right there. So delete that cube, we don't need it, but we will need a plane to start out with. So I'm going to choose, oops, sorry, I need to explain what I'm doing here. So of course we're clicking on the new shape tool, or you can hit Control-Shift-K on the keyboard. I like keyboard shortcuts, they're a lot quicker, but whichever works best for you. I'm going to choose a plane and set it to a width and height. So that's just the, maybe that should be width and length, depending on which direction you're looking at it. Don't need any width segments. I'm just going to use this to apply a texture that's sort of a top-down plan that'll help me build this level out. Also, I noticed that my light mapping is going. It might be getting in the way. I'm going to right away turn that off under Window Lighting Settings. Turn off both the real-time lighting and mixed lighting. However, I'm leaving the auto-generate on just in case I need to, well, I'll just leave it alone because it doesn't matter since I have both of those turned off. Okay, so now things will work a little more smoothly and you won't see those nasty half-baked shadows as they come in and out while you're editing the mesh. That can be annoying. So we have our plane, and what I'm using this for is I have this interior plan that I've created, and I'm going to use this. I have added it to a unlit texture material, so light is not going to affect this surface. Drag and drop it right on. Right from the start, it's super duper tiling across this plane. We can change that easily using the UV editor. So here in the editor, if I select that face, the only face on the plane, you can see that it's super tiling. That's all right. Change the fill mode to stretch. Now it's going to stretch to fill, and you instantly have that working nicely. You could also modify the tiling, specifically some other things, but using the stretch for the fill mode is really the quickest way to do this. All right. So this is my map. I drew this up real quick in Photoshop. It's nothing special, but we'll use it so we can draw our geometry on top of this just to give a start. We're not going to be real precise with it. So I'll start by creating the center location. I think I'll use the poly shape for that. So click on New Poly Shape in the toolbar and start clicking around. So again, I'm not worried about matching anything exactly or even having perfect straight lines. I'm just going to build this up to something, and the height also really doesn't matter yet at this point. Because I just drew this in Photoshop, obviously the drawing is not going to match the grid unless you're real precise. It could have been, I guess, but there didn't really seem to be a need for that. Okay, I've created the center section. Let's go ahead and exit poly editing on that, or poly shape editing. Looks pretty good. Now I'm going to draw out the rest. So, oh, sorry, the reason I did this is we don't have the ability yet in PolyShape to make, let's see, shapes with holes in them. So we have to draw this as two separate parts. So we have the center, and then we have all the outer areas. We'll connect those together later. All right, so let's create that. I'm going to move into a top ISO view so I can see it a bit better as I'm creating, or it's simpler. And again, click on New PolyShape, and I'll start clicking around to create this. Not worrying too much about being perfectly precise, but trying to be somewhat so I don't have to go back and redo a lot. It's very easy to edit this later if you need to, so you could just click around real fast and not worry about it. if you make a misclick like that, I can see that's pretty far off. Again, I can change it later. Even right now I can change it if I want to, or I can just hit Control Z and that point placement is undone, but I'm still in the creation mode, so I can just click and keep going. So undo will work just fine while you are placing points. Good to keep in mind. Or just move that point. Real simple. Okay, let me move through this pretty quick so you don't have to watch me place each of these. Well, I guess you will have to watch it, but I'll move through it quickly. Or attempt to anyway. Just about done here. Actually getting pretty solid, precise clicks here, not bad. Okay, when I complete the poly shape by clicking on the final point, then it adds the top and bottom faces. And normally, if I were viewing this from the side or any view other than top ISO view, I could move the mouse up and down and change the height. Unfortunately, you can't because you're viewing it straight up and down here. That's fine. I'm going to simply exit the poly editing and directly set the extrusion height. So I'm going to say 5 meters. Off the top of my head, I think that was the same height as the center position. So hooray, we've done that correctly. Next thing to do is take a quick look around and see if I need to modify any of these positions. So yep, I do. I'll re-enter poly editing or poly shape editing and just move these points around a bit. So using the poly shape is a great way to start creating anything that has a layout like this, or pretty much anything at all. You can always then go and start editing it with the real mesh editing tools anytime. But to start with, this is a great way to quickly sort of move just a single point around and not have to deal with lots and lots of little points. And you can click at any time to add more points. You can select a point and hit backspace to remove it. It's a pretty great tool, so I hope everybody gets some use out of that. Okay, I see I've actually made this area here overlap, and that was, I think, intentional in the drawing. I wanted to add a bit more detail, but I don't know if we'll have time for that. So I'm just going to pull this over and kind of remove that. Maybe I could add it in later if I want to. But for now, simplifying. Okay, we have that ready. Now let's go ahead and take the few little steps to make this playable. And after that, we'll start detailing a little bit. Before we jump into that even, let's apply some real basic vertex colors. I noticed that this is really blasting out with the light right now, very hard to see. So I'm going to just open up the vertex color palette here. And with the exterior areas selected, I'm going to apply a light gray color. And for the center, I'll apply that orange color. Later on, we'll do a bit more with those vertex colors, even to separate areas into different, maybe it would be team areas, red team, blue team, etc. That's kind of how I have it drawn out in that plan. But for now, this is good enough. Now let's make this map playable in 2 clicks. So I have, well, actually let's do it in 1 click. Select both of these areas, the center and the outer, and click flip normals. And there we have it. Instant level with some crazy Z fighting going on there. Let's hide that plane on the bottom. We can also hide the grid and move back to perspective. Okay, so I made some extra clicks there, but the idea was, if I undo that, so we had this, it was drawn basically as an exterior, and then simply clicking on flip normals in the object tools panel here, flips them right into an interior space. Hooray. So at this point, you could instantly drop in your character controller, etc., and start running around to test out this level. We have a couple issues going on here that we're going to fix. So number one, the tunnel ends don't actually connect into anything yet. We need to make those real entrances. Number two, we have, well, 2 out of 3, I guess. We have these funny looking light leaks coming in from the directional light, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later on. And number 3, it just looks really boring. So again, in the detailing phase, we'll do a little bit more work to make this look better, of course. It's important to remember though, you're just grayboxing at this point. You don't want to worry too much about details. Just get it to a point where you can test out that level flow and your mechanics, etc. So number 1, we need to make it so we can actually run through these hallways into the central area. So I'm going to move into face editing mode. And right now I have select hidden turned on. So what will happen is when I click, I select anything that I click on, which is kind of a problem because as you can see, it's selecting the back face here. So if I turn off select hidden, now my click is going to go through the back face and just select what I can see. So this makes it very simple. I can just hold shift and click on each of these faces to select them and hit backspace. So now I've created the holes in the tunnels here. I just need to do the same thing for the center. So here what I'm going to do is use some loops and rings to add a bit more geometry into the center so I can connect these up or align the ends. So hitting Alt-U will insert a loop. I could also use just a simple edge connection here because that's all I really need right there. However, I like to use the loops if I can, especially if I know all parts of the loop will be used, because then you keep quads instead of n-gons. So right now, for example, because I've added just this single edge here, now if I move this around, you can see how this is an n-gon. It's not just a nice four-sided shape. And if I were to end up moving this, something like this or whatever, you start to get these weird, ugly, triangulated surfaces, which aren't so great. So quads and tris help you not have those issues. So instead of just doing that simple edge connect, I'm going to use a full loop. So again, Alt-U will insert the loop, or you can click on the Insert Edge Loop in the toolbar. Insert, move it to where I need on one side, do the same again for the other side of that entrance, and then I'll line up the edges also over here. Do the same thing on this side. Alt-U to drop that in. And again for the other one. You'll notice that ProGrids is making my life very easy at this point. This is another reason I like to start when greyboxing with a pretty high level on the grid. I'm using a full meter grid right now. As I get more detailed, of course, I'll really need to drop that down, otherwise I'll have a very blocky level. But when starting out, this really makes your life much more, makes the greyboxing much simpler. Okay, so once again, I'm going to click, select each of these faces, and just backspace to delete. So our level is now completely playable. Pretty simple. And we're going to add a little bit more detail and interest to it. Number one, let's move this central area up along with the entrances so that we have some vertical movement in the level, always important. So I'll select both the outer areas and the inner so that I can move the vertices at the same time, and swap into a full top view actually to make sure I get this selection just right. Turn back on select hidden because some of these vertices down here, for example, are not going to be selected otherwise because I can't see them. I can only see the ones on top here. Now I drag select, being careful to avoid areas like over here, the other rooms. I just want to get just the central area and where the other tunnels connect up to it. And I'm going to move that up a few meters. Just enough to give it a bit of interest there. And maybe I'll do the same for some of these outer rooms. So I can exit the ISO mode now. I don't need to be quite so precise. Let's see, this should be good. Move this down a couple. Maybe I want to move this entire section down a bit as well. Maybe I could have stayed in that top ISO mode to make my life a little bit easier, but I think this will be all right. So move this down just the same as I'd moved the other one down, I think, so it matches. And for some extra fancy variety, I'll move this one upward. So we've added that variety. However, we now have a bit of a problem from this. And you know what? I'm going to flip this back because it's easy to flip that back and forth. But when it's flipped this way, so it's an exterior shape, I find it easier to clean up some of these geometry issues here. So you'll see that we have moved, let's see. For example, we moved these vertices up, creating a slant or a diagonal on this edge here, as well as over here. However, we have more connections or joints, or I'm not sure what you'd want to call that, on one side than the other. So we're getting, if I turn on the shaded wireframe, you'll see the triangulation. This isn't actually what we want to see. We need to manually add in some extra edges. So in this case, we'll go around and add this in quick. So I can select these two edges and just do Alt-E. So I'm not adding a loop because I don't actually want to go all the way around through. So if I did a loop, actually I can't insert a loop because that's not a quad right now, but if I were to do something like that, it would create an edge all the way around here, which I do not want because I already have the edge right here, which I'm just trying to replicate. Okay, so show and tell, let's actually do the show part. Let's do it, so maybe it'll make more sense. So I add this extra edge, and then I can hold V while I'm working in element mode in ProBuilder, and I can use a specific axis to snap on. So holding V, I'll click on this blue axis here in the direction I want, and then move my mouse, and you'll see it snaps to wherever the mouse is hovering over. In this case, I want it to snap right to that point there. Then I need to move it down a bit. Again, ProGrid's really helping out here, and I have that nice proper angle. Do the same thing on this side. So Alt-E to connect that edge, hold V to snap, and move this down. Oops, too far. There we go. Lastly, I'll just need to connect these edges. I don't really need to. As you can see, the triangulation is actually going correctly for me right now. But to make sure that the normals are broken up, give these surfaces a proper breakup in that way, I'm going to connect the vertices as well. So I've done that, and now we have the look that we were going for there. Okay, so I'll need to do that on each of the others. You don't necessarily need to watch through that, so I'm just going to run through it and speed up the process. Alright, I've finished connecting all those edges. Now I can flip that back to an interior space, and if I take a look at it in here, let's fly around a bit. Again, we have a bit more interesting level, some ups and downs, etc. Much better now. Definitely much better. A couple areas we probably want to take a look at. This ramp here is way too steep, and we should really add a bit to this central area. Let's go ahead and edit those a little bit here. So this ramp area over here, easiest way I think to affect that would probably be just pulling this out to the side a bit more. So I can grab those verts and pull them out a few meters. If I were being real careful, maybe I would make sure all of the ramps have an exact angle they're using. So if I have a generic stair module or something, I could use that later on, but it's not really important just yet, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. Next, I'd like to make this central area have a bit more interest to it as well. So I'm going to turn off the select hidden so that I can click through to grab the bottom, and then I'm going to use the grow selection tool. So over here in your toolbar, you see the grow selection. It has that little gear icon. That means you can open up, get some extra options. I have restrict to angle turned on, and what that means is when I hit Alt-G or click on the grow button, it grows the selection out but restricted to a certain angle, so the selection won't climb up the walls basically. And you can change exactly what that angle is depending on what sort of surface you're on. It's a great tool to have. In the demo level that I showed, we had quite a bit going on in here. I don't think we'll have time to do all of that. Let's go ahead and add something though. I'll take this and hold Shift to extrude and pull it down, let's say quite a bit, so we can add sort of a bridge in the center here. And then I'll also grab the ceiling, hit Alt-G again to grab all of that without clicking one by one. And again, holding Shift, I'll extrude that up quite a ways, give it some height there. Then I could maybe just sort of cheat throw in a little bit of movement here, nothing special. Let's just make things appear that we worked on it and maybe made something interesting. Give it a pyramid-y shape. Hooray, amazing, amazing level architecture. All right, good enough for now, for sure. So I'm going to start throwing in a bit of some connectors here. So I hit Control-K to spawn in a brand new cube, and holding down the V key, I can snap using points, because I'm still in object mode here. So I'll just grab this, I think, upper corner here, and snap it right over to where there's another vert right here at the edge. So with this, I'm going to start building out sort of a bridge system in here. So I can select a face, pull it over, I'm not extruding, just moving. And then I'm going to move that over to here. I'm aligning myself to right about, you can see where this other entrance is coming in. And then I hold Shift and extrude over to the other side of the entrance. If I didn't get that correct, that's okay. I could always just grab those verts. Let's make sure and turn back on. Select hidden, otherwise we won't get those extra hidden ones down on the bottom here. As I was saying, I could grab those verts and just move them around to realign, of course, no worries there. And I'll grab the face on the side and pull it over to match. Something similar over here, except maybe now I'll use an extra extrude. And I'll need to hold V, click on that axis, and snap it over so that it matches the entrance here. Oops, again, grab that face and pull it over to match. And one last one on this side. So I'll pull this over. It's like that's not quite going to match, so I can just grab the face, move it till it matches. Be careful with something like this. If I were to pull this past the other one, you can kind of see, I just tried to point at my screen, that won't work of course. You can kind of see now these, well, really see the edges overlapping, giving you some weird geometry there. That's just ProBuilder doing what you tell it to. It's a very literal tool, as all mesh tools, so you've got to be careful. If you make some overlaps, kind of watch what you're doing there. In this case, luckily it ends just in time. It doesn't overlap at all. And I'll do the same on the other side, right there. With the rooms all connected, our level is now looking pretty good. We can playtest it, we can start tweaking, but let's add a bit more to it. We can add some geometry detail, and we can clean up these nasty looking light leaks that are going on. So about the light leaks, there's been quite a bit of discussion on this, and the problem really is if you have a directional light and you aren't baking it, you're using it real time, and you have invisible back faces that light is going through, you're going to have these light leaks no matter what type of mesh you're using. But you have a couple tricks you can work with here. On your directional light, if you have to have it, turn the normal bias down and you'll see most of those light leaks go away. However, on the edges you still have that problem. So let's just undo that and leave it alone. The next thing you could try is swapping to baked lighting instead of real time. That'll fix it, but it also means you don't get the real time directional, and maybe you need that for your game. So what else can we do? You could, instead of having these invisible back faces, build a shell that goes around the outside of your level. Kind of time consuming and not really what we need for this level. It's just an interior. We don't actually have a need for that directional light, right? It's just kind of hanging out there doing nothing. We're down in a cave or something right now. So I'm going to delete my directional light. It's not actually needed, and start placing some real lights, or let's say just, I don't mean real lights, point lights on the inside here. So we can go to tools, oops, sorry, not tools, game object. It will create some point lights, or you can use spotlights, anything like that. And that appeared in a crazy spot. I can hold V, click and move it to a point. Make my life a little bit easier there. And start setting these up in the level. So this is alright. I can drop in these and just have sort of a floating invisible light, but it doesn't really look great, and you'll start to wish for better lighting, better looking lighting. So let's create some very basic light meshes. I'm going to hit Control K. Oops, first just middle click on that wall so that my camera's focused there, and hit Control K to spawn in a new cube and build a really basic light mesh. So in this case, I'm going to start dropping my grid down to maybe about 0.25. You can hit the plus and minus keys on the keyboard to do that quickly. And now I have a much smaller grid, and I can do something like, let's say, I think in the demo level I had something sort of like this, where I had moved around some faces and made just this little item. I'm getting these nasty broken faces on the side here because I just overlaid a couple vertices. That's okay. I can select them and just hit Alt-C to collapse, or of course click in the toolbar, collapse those vertices down so I don't have the bad geometry. Okay, great. So that's our light mesh. Let's take this face here and make it look like a mesh, or sorry, like a light. The way I like to do that is applying you could use either an unlit material or a light emitting material in case you wanted to actually light with it, although that only works in baked lighting and is very slow. So we're just going to fake it by applying let's say, a single or a material to that single face. So I'm dragging and dropping it right onto that face, and I'll leave the rest alone. So now this kind of looks like it's glowing. It could be a light. That's great. I'm going to grab my actual light that I've placed, and move it so it kind of looks like it's coming out of that point. Again, I can hold V and snap it to a corner or something on that light and then finesse it a bit. And there we have our light. And this is, I guess, going to be the, let's say, the red side of this map. So I'm going to also set this color to have sort of a reddish, I guess that becomes pink tint. I don't want it to be too strong. Something like that maybe. And give it, oops, give it a bit more range. Okay, so that is a light. Hooray, looks pretty nice. And I can make this into a prefab so I don't have to keep recreating this over and over. So I'll take both the light, let's actually go ahead and rename this to light mesh. So the light mesh and the point light, and create a new empty game object at the same point. Pull that back out so it's no longer a child, and make these two items childs of this or children of that. And call this our red light. And then I can drag and drop this into my project. I'll just drop it right here. You should probably organize a little better, but for me, that'll work. Now I can go ahead and just keep adding these, as many as I want, all around the level. I'm going to move my grid level up back to 1, so I can place that and not have to worry about where it is. And we'll just place a few of these around. Doing it the easy way. I guess over here they should probably be blue lights because we're placing it on the blue side. But I think we're already pretty close to the 20-minute time or something like that, so I'm not going to go too far. Alright, we've added a whole bunch of lights. And maybe we actually want some of these on the other side as well. So let's rotate this around and move it over to that side. Really not worrying too much about getting this just right yet. Oop, where did I put that one? Right inside or right behind the wall. Alright. Beautiful, perfect, good enough. Good enough for here. Okay, you don't need to see me place lights all day. If you happen to be noticing that your lights are only working in some places, like for here, where's my light? It's not showing up. You'll want to set the point light to be under the render mode, set it to important, just for now. That's not really great for performance in your game if you have a lot of lights going on, but we'll use it for now, otherwise it can be hard to see them while you're greyboxing and setting up here. Okay, so this has some better visuals going on, looking good. And now we no longer have those light leaks showing up, mainly because or entirely because we're just not using that directional light, which again was shining through the invisible back faces and creating those leaks. For one final step, let's go ahead and just add some vertex colors into this, and then maybe a tiny bit of detail geometry, just enough to flesh out the level a bit. So if I'm saying that this side over here is blue and this is red, pretty easy to show that and make the level look a little more interesting. Oop, let's switch to select hidden off so I can click through and grab that and select it on the inside. I'll select just this area, which is maybe blue base or blue starting point. Open up the tools, vertex coloring tools, and apply a nice blue onto that and a red on the other side. And then maybe do the same for these little side rooms because they look like they kind of sort of belong to the others. We'll give this one to blue also, I think. And this one to red. So this is a nice way to break up your level, allow you to visualize it a bit better, and maybe will come into play when you start making the materials and textures for your level. A lot of times you'll see people make the different areas have tints or hues depending on what team side it is. Helps give the player just a little bit of a clue as to if they're in danger zone or not, or they're back in their home base. I also like to sometimes go through and just set the doorways to have or not the doorway, but changes between levels to have a bit of interest here. So I'll select an edge in this hallway and hit Alt-U to throw in a complete edge loop. And then just move this, if I can grab the right plane, there we go, right up here. So I have something that I can work with here. Select that face and all the others around that. And maybe we'll give it sort of a neutral orange color. And that looks, I think, a bit more interesting. Again, not really necessary. But you could go around and do that to each of the hallways or try something else. You could change these ramps into stairs if you wanted to. All sorts of things you could do from here. Another item I like to do is taking ceilings or floors and moving them up or down. It just doesn't look very realistic when you have something like this where these two faces come right directly into each other. You generally don't see that in real life, and it just isn't interesting. Also, ceilings or edges are great places to put signs. So I'm going to select this ceiling here, hold shift and pull it up maybe a meter or two, especially since this is a home section for one of the teams. Maybe it should be a bit taller than the other areas. It makes it look different than the hallways and the small rooms here. Maybe in these I'll just give it 1 extra meter up instead of 2. This is also nice that you have this, this ring around the top that you could also apply a color to. Give it a bit of a bit more, make it more clear that this is red zone up here. And so forth. So quite a bit you can do there, as much as you want. A little bit of geometry detail just for fun. Let's see, in the demo I was throwing in some faked in pipes and stuff, which I like to build just as cubes to start. Makes it much simpler. So I'm just using boxes, bring this up to the ceiling and over. Just boxing it in. Later on I would replace this with something much nicer, of course. Gotta make sure that select hidden is on if I'm going to make a full selection like that. Or maybe these are supports. Could be just about anything. You know, start thinking in your head what should be in this level and how it should be put together. These, if we want to make them look a bit different also, we can select and let's give them also some color. So I really like using vertex colors wherever possible. I think you can really make your level look a lot better than just a flat white or any other color. If you start adding in these colors, it looks like you're texturing, but you're not, obviously. It's very quick and easy. And there we have it. I think that's about as far as we need to go in this tutorial. I think you have the basic ideas to work through and complete this yourself. So you can add more details, you can go as far as you like with this. Again, the idea being just greyboxing, just getting it to a point where you can drop your players in and run around, give it a test. One word of warning, just in case, or one warning, many words. Don't worry too much about lighting right away. I always make the mistake of start baking lighting in. Oh, it looks real pretty, keep baking it and changing the settings and tweaking this and that. You'll just waste days on that. So stick to simple real-time lighting to start with. And as you move along in that, you think you're a little closer to finishing it, then you can eventually, properly double click on that scene. Then you can go through and build in your final lighting, because it is important to make sure and check that your lighting is bouncing around, looking pretty, helping guide the player or make certain areas look more sinister or exciting or whatever it might be. Lighting is super important, but do wait until you're pretty far along. I think it's easy to lose time to that. Okay, so thanks for watching, and we'll see everyone in future walkthrough videos. Hope you enjoyed it.